ब्रह्मानन्दं परमसुखदं केवलं ज्ञानमूर्तिं द्वन्द्वातीतं गगनसदृशं तत्त्वमस्यादिलक्ष्यम् एकं नित्यं विमलमचलं सर्वधी साक्षिभूतं भावातीतं त्रिगुणरहितं सद्गुरुं तं नमामि. Shivam friends, so today we will start from what Maharshi Vishwamitra is to say after hearing Lord Ram's speech. Ram, now it is appropriate that you have your mind properly purified from its doubts, and it was done with Shuka, the son of Vyasa. You see, O great sages, how perfectly the knowable is known to Ram, whose good understanding has learned to feel a distaste for worldly enjoyments as if they were diseases to him. You well know that the fixed principle in the mind of one knowing the knowable is to have an aversion to all the enjoyments of life. The desire of results chains a man to the earth. Knowledge of the frailties here serves to dispel his darkness. Ram knows that curtailing desires is what the wise call liberty, and the attachment of our desires to earthly objects is our confinement here. Spiritual knowledge is easily obtainable by most men, but a distaste for objects is hard to be had. He who fully comprehends a thing is said to know it, and who so knows what is knowable is called a learned man. No earthly enjoyment can be delectable to such high-minded men. The mind that has no zest for earthly pleasures, except the glory of disinterested deeds, is said to be liberated even in the present life. As no vegetable grows in a sterile soil, no disinclination to worldliness grows until one comes to know the knowable reality. Hence, know that the supporter of Raghu's race has truly known the knowable, which has made him disgusted with his princely enjoyments. I tell you, great sages, that whatever Ram has come to know by his intuition requires confirmation by Vasishtha for the tranquility of his mind. For his repose, Ram requires only a reliance upon the unity, just as the beauty of autumn depends upon clear skies. Let the venerable Vasishtha reason with high-minded Ram and restore the peace of his mind, for he is the master and family teacher for the whole race of Raghus. Besides, he is also knowing and all-seeing with a clear insight of the three times. Then addressing himself to Vasishtha, Vishwamitra said, Sage, you well remember the instruction given us of old for pacifying our mutual enmity and promoting the welfare of the high-minded sages. When our Lord, the lotus-born Brahma, seated on the tableland of Nishabd mountain, shaded by sarla trees, delivered his wise lectures to us and the sages. Through that knowledge of liberation, our worldly desires are dispelled like the darkness of night by sunbeams. Now please, O Brahman, communicate that rational knowledge of the knowable to your student Ram, whereby he may gain the peace of his mind. It will not be difficult for you to teach the spotless Ram, whose mirror-like mind is quite clear, to take the reflection. In the wisdom of the holy, the learning of the scriptures and the scholarship of the learned are only praiseworthy when they are communicated to a good student and those who are disgusted with the world. But instruction given to one who is neither student nor disgusted with the world becomes a polluted as milk stored in a hide vessel. Again, the instruction given by one devoid of passions and affections, fear and anger, pride and sin, serves to infuse tranquility into the mind. As these words of Vishwamitra, the son of Gadi, the assembled sages Vyas, Narad, and others honored his speech with exclamations of bravo, well said, and the like. Then the venerable Vashisht, brilliant like Brahma his father, and sitting by the side of the king, spoke in reply. O sage, I will perform what you have commanded me to do without fail, for whom, though mighty, can refuse to perform the request of the good and wise? I will destroy the mental darkness of Prince Ram and others by the light of knowledge, just like we dispel the gloom of night by the light of a lamp. I will well remember the instructions for dispelling the errors of the world that we were given of yore by the lotus-born Brahma of Nishad mountain. Having said so, the high-minded Vashisht made up his mind, one as girds up his loins to deliver his lecture to Ram in order to dispel his ignorance and show him the state of supreme joy. With this ends this chapter. And in another chapter, Vashisht ji is speaking about repeated creations of the world and repeated incarnations of the same personality. Vashisht ji said, Ram, I will now expound to you the knowledge that was imparted of old by lotus born for the peace of mankind after he created the world. Ram said, Sage, I know that you will expound to me the subject of liberation in full length, but first remove my false ideas about the frailty of this world. How was it that the great sage Vyas, the father and guide of Shuk, with all his omniscience, did not attain disembodied emancipation when his son did? Vashi said, there is no counting the atoms that proceed from the spirit and from the three worlds, both before and after the birth of the glorious Son. There is nobody who can even count the millions of orbs that form the three worlds, nor can anyone calculate what numbers of creation will rise from the ocean of divine existence like endless waves. Ram said, it is needless to talk of worlds gone by or yet to come. Speak of the present. Vashi said, this world consists of brute, human, and heavenly beings whose lives, when they are set to perish in any part of it, really exist in the same part. The mind is described as ever fluctuating. In itself, it gives rise to everything in the three worlds. It resides in a void in the form of heart, and the uncreated also resides in the empty space of the soul. The millions of beings who are dead, those who are dying, and will die hereafter, are all to be reborn here according to the different desires in their minds. The external world appears as a reality, but in truth, it is only a creation of our desires. It is an ideal castle in the air and a magic view spread before us. It is as false as an earthquake in a fit of delirium. Like a hobgoblin shown to terrify children, like a string of pearls in the clear sky, and like trees on a bank appear moving to a passenger in a boat. It is an illusion like the phantom of a city in a dream, and as untrue as the imagination of a flower growing in the air. It is at the point of death and afterwards that the unreality of the world best appears. But this knowledge becomes darkened upon being reborn on earth, when the shadow of this world again falls on the mirror of his sentient soul. Thus there is a struggle for repeated births and deaths here, and a fancy for the next world after death. After he shuffles off his body, he assumes another and then another form, and thus the world is as unstable as a stool made of plantain leaves and its coatings. The dead have no sensation of the earth and other bodies made of the elements, or of course of the world, but they fall again to those errors upon being reborn here. There is an interminable ignorance resembling an immense river enveloping the face of creation and breaking into streamlets of ignorance that are impossible to cross. Divinity is like a sea shoots forth in various waves of creation that rise constantly and plentifully one after the other. All beings here are only the waves of this sea. Some are alike to one another in their minds and natures, while others are half like, and some quite different from the rest. I reckon that sage Vyas here, on account of his vast knowledge and good looking appearance, is one of the 32 of these waves. There are 12 possessed of a lesser understanding. There were the patriarchs of man and endued with equal energy. 10 were men of subdued spirits, and the rest were adepts in their family duties. There will be born again other Vyas and Valmikis, and likewise some other Bhrigus and Angiras, as well as other Pulastyas and others in different forms. All other men all other men, asuras, and gods with all their hosts are repeatedly born and destroyed, either in their former or different shapes. Like this, there are 72 Treta cycles in a Kalp age of Brahma, some of which have passed by and others to follow. Thus, will there be other people like those who have gone by, and as I understand, another Ram and Vashisht like ourselves? There have been 10 successive incarnations of this Vyas who has done such wonderful deeds and is famed for his vast knowledge. Myself and Valmiki have been contemporaries many a time, born in different ages and very many times. We have been together many times, and there were others also like myself, and so was I also born in many forms. This Vyas will be born again 8 times hereafter, and he will again write his Mahabharata and Puran histories. He will finally attain liberation from the body after he has divided the Vedas, described the acts of Bharat's race, and established the knowledge of Brahman. This Vyas, who is devoid of fear and sorrow, and who has become tranquil and emancipate in himself after subduing his mind and discarding the worldly desire, is said to be liberated even in his present lifetime. Those liberated in life may sometimes associate with relatives and estates, his acts and duties, his knowledge and wisdom, and all his exertions, like those of any other man, or he may forsake them all at once. These beings are either reborn 100 times in some age or never at all, depending on the inscrutable will of God. Souls undergo such changes by repetition, like a bushel of grain that is collected only to be repeatedly sown, then reaped again and again. As the sea heaves its constant surges of different shapes, so all beings are born constantly in various forms in the vast ocean of time. The wise man who is liberated in his lifetime lives with his internal belief in a state of tranquility without any doubt in his mind, and quite content with the ambrosia of equanimity. Maharishi Vashisht is continuing in 4th chapter also. I know, gentle Ram, that liberation of the soul is the same, whether it is embodied or disembodied. Just like sea water and its waves are the same liquid substance, liberation, whether of embodied or disembodied spirits, consists in their detachment from the objects of sense. Hence, the soul unattached to sensual gratification is liberated, having no idea of objects of the senses. We see before us the living liberated sages like Vyasji as an embodied person, yet we have no doubt of the detachment of his inner soul from his body. The difference between embodied and disembodied souls, when they are equally enlightened and liberated, is like that of the sea water in its calm and mellow states. There is no more difference between liberation in the body and without the body than there is between the air in motion and at rest. Liberation, whether with or without the body, produces unselfishness. We have lost our selfishness ever since we have come to the knowledge of an undivided unity. Therefore, attend to the true doctrine that I am going to deliver to you, which will be a jewel to your ears, as it will dispel the darkness of ignorance. Know, O son of Raghu, that everything in this world is obtainable by our efforts being properly employed. This knowledge that there is no other way to gain results except by our efforts rises like the moon in the human mind and sheds its cooling and delightful influence to the heart. It will become evident that we see the results of our efforts and that nothing comes from what the dull and mistaken call chance or fate. An effort, when directed according to the counsel and conduct of the good in the exercise of the action of the body and mind, is attended with success. Otherwise, it is as vain as the freak of a madman. Thus, he who hopes to acquire riches and perseveres in its acquisition surely succeeds in gaining them, or else he stops short midway. It was by means of their efforts that some particular persons have obtained the paramount dominion of Indra over the three worlds. It is by the efforts that one attains the rank of the lotus-born Brahma, and some by effort even gain the inner joy of the state of Brahma. It is by virtue of effort that somebody becomes the best among men, even as he who wears the flag of the eagle. It was by the exertion of one's efforts that some succeeded to obtain the form of Shiva, accompanied by his female power and adorned by the crescent moon as his crest. Know our actions to be of two kinds, namely those of former and present lives. Know that the acts of the present life generally supersede those of the past. Know also that energy joined with constant practice and supported by wisdom and some stimulating force is able to break down Mount Meru and the demerits of acts in man's former lives. The exertions of a man proceeding from his good efforts and countenanced by the law lead to his success, or else they either go for nothing or turn to his disadvantage. A man laid up in the state of disability is unable to twist his figure to hold a little water in the hollow of his palm to drink. Meanwhile, there is another who gets possession of seas, islands, mountains, and cities for himself, supports all his dependents and relations, and doesn't think this earth too great for him. Vashishi is continuing in the chapter 5th, where he emphasizes on necessity of effort. Will or inclination, even according to the rules of law and scriptures, is the prime instrument of all action, just as the reflection of light gives various colors to things. If someone uses unlawful acts to attain something that he desires, it becomes as fruitless as the efforts of a madman. Good or evil results depend upon how you try, but according to the fatalist, fate and efforts are the joint causes of acts. The truth is, human exertions are either lawful or unlawful. The former lead to success and the latter to dangerous consequences. Fortune and efforts contend with each other like two rams of unequal strength where the mightier overcomes the other. Therefore, man should apply himself diligently and employ his skill and effort in such a way that his today may overcome his tomorrow. When two unequal forces contend with one another, like two rams, the stronger force, whether of his or that man, overcomes the other. When one incurs a failure or danger, even by his lawful efforts, he should know it to be the result of his misapplied efforts. By utmost exertion in the right way, like gnashing his teeth, one can overcome his misfortune and that bad luck that sometimes baffle his efforts. When one finds himself led astray by the demerit of his acts of a former state of existence, he must attempt to subdue them by the greater energy of his present state. One should endeavor to exercise his efforts so much that he may beat down the evils resulting from his bad fortune. The evils of bad fortune are undoubtedly removed by the meritorious acts of the present life, just like the bad consequence of an act of yesterday is averted by its remedy of today. Having trampled over an unfavorable fortune by one's reliance upon his continuous effort, he must attempt to secure to himself every good for his well-being in his present life. Know that tranquility is not to be found through the effortless of dull ass-like men. It is the lawful energy of man which is set to secure his welfare in both worlds. One should make his way out of this pit of this world by force of his energy and diligence, just like a lion breaks out from his cage. Every day one must contemplate that his body is subject to corruption. His beastly acts must be kept back, and manlike acts must be put forward. Good efforts are attended by good results, just like bad ones are followed by bad consequences. Chance is merely a meaningless word. Do not make your bloom of youth as useless as ashes by sitting idly at home and enjoying the bliss of the harem like a maggot in a bond. He who has no reliance on present objects but depends upon assumptions from the past is like a man running in fear from his own hands, supposing them to be snakes. It is a pleasure to men of perverted understanding to think of themselves as guided by their fortunes. Prosperity flies far away from such men who depend on their luck. Therefore, let a man diligently apply himself first to his reason and then investigate the works of subtle, hidden spiritual knowledge. Those who do not set their hearts to act according to the dictate of the scriptures, but use other means to make efforts to gain, are accursed as madmen because their efforts are in vain. But people do not even try to make an effort. They think that the efforts would be endless and no amount of effort could make a gem out of a stone. Know that, like all things, there is a limit to both human fate and effort. Just like a pot or a picture, it is by means of good conduct, derived from best precepts and the company of good, that one succeeds in his object. A disposition that breaks loose of these is sure to fall to the contrary, to ruin. Again, any man who conducts himself in the right course of action will never fail in his attempts at any time. Some among the best of men had been reduced to misery by their poverty and helplessness, yet by exertion of their manhood they have again rise to the eminence of Indra. By learning the scriptures well from boyhood, by keeping company with the good, by possession of good qualities, and by diligent application, a man is sure to gain his object. It has been seen, known, heard, and experienced that acts are rewarded with success. They are dull-headed who think of obtaining it through fate or luck. If there were no folly of idleness in this world, what man would fail either to be rich or learned? It is because of the idleness that this earth is filled to its utmost limit of the sea with indigent and beastly men. After passing his childhood and getting rid of its false and idle playfulness, and when he has attained the age of youthful vigor, let a man apply himself diligently to the company of wise men and to the cultivation of his understanding by a knowledge of the scriptures and their meanings, and by scanning well his own faults and qualities. After sage Vasishtha had said all this, the day passed away, and after taking leave of the assembly, the sages went to bathe. With the rising beams of the sun, dispelling the gloom of night, they joined again. And what is fate? Fate is the result of former efforts. This is Vasishtha saying in chapter 6. Fate is nothing but the result of our actions in former existences. Therefore, it is possible to leave it at a distance and extricate oneself by keeping good company and studying moral scriptures. Whatever one attempts to do, he readily meets with its reward. This is the effect of effort. Fate is nothing but the same thing. Men laboring hard are heard to exclaim, "Oh, how painful it is!" Men suffering under fate cry out, "Oh, hard fate! How hard is the fate!" Thus, fate being nothing but a name for our past actions, it is as easily overcome as a boy by an adult youth. As some bad conduct of yesterday is corrected by proper behavior of the present day, so his past fate is removed by present acts. Carnal-minded libertines who make no effort but depend upon the favor of fortune are perverted in their nature and marked for misery. Thus, if acts of courage are capable of averting one's misfortunes, then it must be acknowledged that such courage which destroys the other is the mightier of the two. Just like two fruit growing on the same branch, one empty within and the other full of juice, so does courage render the fruit of fate empty. Seeing the decay of the best things in the world, we must own the predominant power of the cause of this decay. Like two rams, our fate and efforts are fighting one another. Victory is always on the side of the stronger. In case of a royal elephant taking up a beggar boy to be made a ruler, its cause is to be attributed more to the vote of countrymen and citizens. As a man takes his food and grinds it under his teeth, so is one crushed by the stronger party relying on his efforts. Thus, more active masters employ inferior servants like clods of earth in any work the masters like. Silly and impotent men, seeing the strong fly by their effort, whether apparent or unseen, are apt to attribute it to their good luck. The strong efforts of men truly constitute the fortune that governs them, and these two are viewed alike by the wise. In the case of a beggar boy who is installed into the position of ruling and protecting the people of a kingdom, it is unanimous concurrence of the law and ministers and of the elephant and of citizens. Should it be only the royal elephant whom elects the beggar boy, then in that case it would be attributed to the boy's good fortune only. Present acts destroy those of the past life, and those of the past life can destroy the effect of the present acts. But the exertions of a man are undoubtedly successful. Of these two powers, that of the present is manifestly superior to the past. Hence, it is as possible for the present to overcome the past, just like it is for an adult to overcome a boy. As a hail shower lays waste the cultivation of a whole year, so also does predominant fate sometimes overpower the attempts of this life. However, It doesn't behoove us to be sorry at the loss of our long-earned treasure. For what does it serve to have sorrow for something that is beyond our control? If I have sorrow for what am powerless to prevent, then I may as well weep all the days of my life because death will not spare me. All our acts are subject to their proper time and place and to the modes of their operation and combination according to the course of nature. That is why the more diligent are the most successful. Therefore, in order to cross the ocean of this world, we ought to rely upon our efforts and the clarity of our understanding from the help of scriptures and association with the wise. Actions of the past and present lives are the two fruit trees growing in the garden of humanity. Whichever is cultivated the best thrives and bears most fruit. He who is unable to overcome his false fate by his best efforts is no better than an ignorant beast that has no power over its pain or pleasure. He who thinks of going to heaven or hell by the will of the Maker is also a slave to destiny and is no better than a beast. The man of a noble mind who is employed in acts of goodness breaks off the errors of the world like a lion from its cage. Those who vainly imagine that themselves to be led about by some supernatural power and so slight their necessary duties are to be shunned at a distance as the mean and base. There are thousands of acts that are attended with gain or loss to their doers. But it is the duty of the man to do what is right, whether they be pleasant or painful. He who doesn't transgress the bounds of law and doesn't forsake his duties is attended by every blessing, abundant as the pearls in the sea. The wise describe courage as devoted diligence in acts leading to one's objects. Being guided by the scriptures leads to his success. An act accompanied by exertion accomplishes one's object, and the company of the wise and the study of good books serve to raise a man by brightening his understanding. The wise know infinite happiness or a tranquil spirit is the supreme good, and those good works are fit for study which lead to that state. The acts of our former lives constitute what we call our fate or destiny, and they return to us from the region of the gods for our good in both worlds. We blame a fate that it is the creation of the fancy of the ignorant, who by their adoration of such passivity meet their own destruction. One benefits himself always by his activity in both worlds, as the good acts of today give a grace to those of yesterday. Therefore, whoever applies himself with diligence to his acts reaps their fruit like that of a amalki in his palm, which though it is within his grasp, yet it could not be obtained without the cost of some labor. Only the ignorant depart from the beaten path and fall into the error of fatalism. Therefore, give up that false faith in an unreal fate, which is a mere creation of the imagination and devoid of any cause or effect. Apply your manly exertions. The fruit of following the scriptures and observing good customs and local uses is long known, exciting the heart and the exertion of the limbs to action. This is what called manly activity. All wise men, after discussion of the subject of fate and acts, have applied themselves to action by utter rejection of fatality and have accomplished their ends by attendance on good and the wise. Knowing the efficacy of activity, everyone should work on personal effort and attain to his highest perfection by attending to good scriptures and the wise counsels of learned men. Knowing that the bondage of our birth is full of pain, let people listen to the wise and strive to exercise their efforts to obtain the true and sweet blessings of tranquility. With this, we end today's session of Readout, and we will meet again tomorrow Until then, Shivoham.